What's going on, guys? This is JBW with Mystic West Music, and today I'm going to be bringing to you a little history lesson about Ben and Kerry. This is going to be how we met. It's going to be about the bands we were in. It's going to be about the music we made. It's going to be about the journey that the two of us had together. Let's go ahead and get into this video. I'm going to start it off with how we met. When Kerry and I first met, it was in high school. I remember we actually met in the band room. He might have been on his lunch period because the band room was right next to the lunchroom. And at that point, I had been asking around for a drummer because I had some songs I wanted to record. I had previously recorded some stuff with a band called Radiotherapy, and I had met some of those guys from a youth group. We kind of broke up because they didn't want to do some of the music I liked, and it was just kind of this whole thing. So anyways, I had written some songs at that point, and I was looking for a drummer. And I was asking around about Kerry. Well, I was asking around for a drummer. People told me about Kerry. So we met, band room, talked about it. We met up. I asked the lead guitarist from the previous band, Radiotherapy, if he could play the guitar for me and do maybe like a solo. So he agreed. So at that point, it was three of us. Kerry actually had a friend named John Godfrey. He played bass. And the guitarist's name was Patrick Canada. We all went over to the same guy who recorded us in that previous band I was in. I recorded 3 songs. One of them was just acoustic. One of them was called You Are. And I'll go ahead and play a little sample of that. And now this next song is the very first song that I wrote, and it's called From the Start. And this is still with the 4 of us. Pat's on the guitar, John's on bass, and Kerry's on drums, and I'm doing the piano and the singing. So here's a little bit of a clip from that. Right from the start, over you had my heart. And now the interesting thing about us getting together for those 2 songs really is that after the 4 of us played together, we kind of had like a pretty good vibe, and we actually formed our own band called The Style. In The Style, it was me, Patrick, John, and Kerry, and I played the piano and the synth. Kerry was drums, John was bass, and Pat was the guitar. And here's a quick little video of a performance that we did at a talent show at Woodstock High School. I sang one of the songs that we did, and then Pat sang 2 of the other ones. And I'm going to show you a clip. This one is going to be the one where I sang, called Mess. So here's a clip of that. Beautiful on the outside, but you're such a mess. On the inside, you're drowning now, and there's no one to pick you. And Patrick was the one who... he wrote a lot of the riffs. I remember he kind of came up with all the ideas, and then we would kind of like fill it in, and he would sort of direct us like a little bit. But these next 2, it's called Run and The Taste. So here's Run. And here's a clip of The Taste. Well, didn't you say that you wanted to stay, and that you wanted, and that you needed? Now, as I mentioned before, Patrick, he definitely had a very good idea of what we were doing as a band, but me as a songwriter, like, I always got kind of frustrated when I tried to bring something like for the band, but he would kind of say no. Because at that time, it was very indie dance, like the Killers and all those were kind of popular, so he wanted to do stuff like that. And I was like, okay. But he was going to leave to go to school, and Kerry and I had talked about, like, well, if we're just going to break up anyways, like, why not do it now? And so there was this whole thing. We kind of all had a falling out. However, Kerry and I, like, stayed in touch. Patrick moved. I still see John every once in a while. So after that, like, we still hung out. Like, Kerry and I still hung out. I guess I could say it. Why not? We used to smoke a lot of weed, like drive around and like hang out and kind of party and stuff like that. So I still hung out with him for a while, and then I think I moved, and then there was like school and college and all this stuff. And years later, I think I got a hold of them. I had a friend named Ryan Addison, and I was in a jam band with Ryan. Man, I can't remember what the jam band was called. But it was me. I played the piano. Ryan was the lead guitar. There was a singer, a drummer, a bass player, and maybe an acoustic guitar player. And it was definitely a jam band. So I had gone to school with Ryan, and I was in that band with Ryan. So after all of that, like Ryan and I think were probably like, hey, do you want to like play together? Or I called him up or whatever. And so I called Ryan. He was like, yeah, like let's do it. And then I was like, all right, well, like, hey, I need to drum. Let's call Kerry, like, you know. So the three of us started jamming. The first name that we called ourselves was the Dirty Muffins. I remember we were thinking about that name outside of Kerry's apartment where we jammed for a little bit. He was living kind of close to Atlanta. So we jammed over there for a little bit. And then I think we started jamming in the basement of my brother-in-law's house when he lived there. There was a room in the basement, so we started jamming there at one point. I think after I cleared it out and everything. So here's the thing about the Dirty Muffins. Like we did a lot of the songs that like I wrote, and we didn't really call ourselves the Dirty Muffins that long, but I remember the conversation about it. And I know eventually we changed our name to the Flip Flop Trio because I know Kerry liked the idea of flip-flops, just like flip-flops, like wearing flip-flops. And Ryan and I liked the idea of flip-flopping instruments because like, you know, I dabbled in all the instruments, and Ryan wanted to do the other instruments and like learn them. And Kerry was more of a drummer. Like I think we tried to have him play piano or something, and he just wasn't feeling it. So we still stuck with the flip-flop trio, even though we just stuck to our instruments. Like I was on the guitar or the piano, and Ryan was on bass, and Kerry was on drums. So here's a couple clips of songs we did. This one is called Simply Easy. And I did the trumpet sound with a keyboard in there. This song is a little clip. It's going to be called Oh Mary. This is one that I wrote. And here's another clip of a song called Oceany. Here's a clip of a song called Wrong Side, Right Side. Here's one called Save the Day. Here's a little clip from a song called Tree Fried. Now, all of these songs are just little clips. A lot of them, I was just writing like crazy back then. Just trying to write about whatever I could and, you know, just trying to give us material. You know, Ryan was always like, oh, you know, I just want to play bass. He didn't care. Kerry was always super like, oh, it's awesome. So at a certain point, the three of us kind of talked about like, oh, like, you know, like, what if we had like another person in the band? You know, like Ryan, like, what if you played the guitar again and I played the piano? So we started talking about just being able to do more because we kind of felt somewhat restricted with just the three of us. I mean, during that time, I definitely got better at soloing and kind of playing like Jimi Hendrix style, like kind of where you kind of have to do chords and melodies and you kind of like, you know, fill it out a little bit more. So I kind of was doing that a little bit. You know, on the recordings, I could add more stuff. But so we were looking for a fourth. And Kerry's friend Davis, who I had known, but that was really one of Kerry's friends. But I had hung out with Davis and you know, done all that kind of stuff with. And once Davis joined, we did a lot of songs that the three of us did, like Tree Fried, and I don't know if we did Party Girl. I think we did Caught the Blues. So we did a lot of the songs that we had done as the trio. But there is one song that the four of us wrote together, and that one's called Carnival. I really, really like that song. I know Davis really does too. So here's a little clip of Carnival. It's just instrumental, like no vocals, except the very beginning I added some. I wanted to call it Dante's Carnival and like make this whole story, but it just didn't really fit. So anyways, this is a clip of Carnival from the pop Juggernauts. So we, like the three of us were like really feeling that song. Unfortunately, my friend Ryan wasn't so much. And the interesting thing about that is that when it was the three of us, when we added the fourth, like we kind of wanted to go back to the trio, but we just weren't really sure like how to do it. So that ended up kind of just causing Ryan to leave, because we were younger, so instead of just being adults, being like, hey, we want to just kind of do the trio thing again, Ryan just left. And then I think the three of us, Davis and Kerry and I, tried, and it kind of just fizzled out. It just wasn't really the same. So we stopped playing together. And then, same thing happened. So I called up Ryan and Kerry again. There was this little contest online. I didn't win, which is okay. But I called up Ryan and Kerry and I was like, hey, like, do you guys want to do a re-recording of a song I did called Bulletproof? And they were like, yeah, sure. So the three of us got together and we did Bulletproof. And here is a clip of Bulletproof. So we did that song, which I think turned out really well. So we started jamming again. After that, it was the three of us. We jammed. We had some interesting times with that. It was always interesting with the three of us because my style was always sort of like, stick to a similar pattern, and then Ryan was more like experimental. So the two of us, like, we would always kind of have issues a little bit. Not really issues, but it was really hard for me to follow him. Like, he was kind of like that much better than me, and he would just kind of go places, and I wouldn't know how to follow him. That's really the best way how to describe that. He was better, and I didn't know how to follow him. We did some covers. We tried to figure out some things, and that ended up just not working out. Like everyone has issues going on in their life at different times. Like, I think Ryan might have had something going on without getting too specific, and that just kind of added on to all of us sort of being like on edge, and it just didn't work out. So after that just became Kerry and myself. So we had a good chemistry. We really liked the songs that we made up together. We had a good vibe. We could literally just sit there and improvise a song and just follow each other and just jam. And one of the things that we liked is that when we didn't have a bass player, like, we could just go wherever. Like, I didn't have to worry about what the bass player was playing. The bass player didn't have to worry about what I'm playing. Like, it was just very easy to just go wherever I wanted, and to know that Kerry could follow me, and then if I would hear like a drum fill or something, he would do, and like if he would switch up the beat, like I could just as easily sort of change my rhythm or playing. We could jam, at the beginning we jammed for long times. Like, we'd get high, just literally probably, and that's probably why they were so long, because we were high. It was just like 30, I think probably the longest jam we had was like 40 to 45 minutes recorded, but we did have a lot of long ones. So we did a lot of that, and at the beginning we wrote a lot. Like, that was like what we did, and we had fun doing that. Like, it was sort of like us just hanging out, but while we hung out, like, we were productive, so like that was sort of like what was the most fun about it. It wasn't like we were just so stressed like about doing the shows. Like, once we started to try to play the shows, which is kind of me, because I was like, okay, like, it's been a year or so, like, we have a lot of good stuff, like, let's start playing. Kerry was really stressed out from work, and so I didn't really know it. I did a little bit, but I was adding on to his stress, which was already like super high, because of his cirrhosis stuff and because of work and things like that. Once we started doing the shows, and I was sort of like pushing for that, and I'll show clips of some of our performances. The main reason that the two of us like split up as a duo at that point, and this was after like a year or two, like after a while, it was just we started to butt heads. Like, we just started to get really kind of irritable around each other. And I think that happens, and it didn't start happening until we started playing shows. So after we broke up, I remember calling him and just being like, hey, we have a lot of good stuff that's not finished. Like, I don't think we should just never play again or hang out and all that stuff. I was like, how would you feel about us maybe meeting up like once a month or every other month? Like, because we were meeting up twice a week, and I didn't want to just like let all of that work go to waste, because I remember saying, like, I think I said exactly that. Like, I don't want all of our music and all these things to go to waste. Like, we need to finish some stuff. And so Kerry agreed. We kept meeting up. We finished Paper Tigers. We did a couple covers, but at that point when we started meeting up, like, we weren't really trying to sit there and go, okay, like, let's make this idea up and let's continue this idea until we make it a solid thing. Like, at that point when we were meeting up, it was really just kind of like stress relief almost at that point. And Kerry actually told me that, like, there was he looked forward to when we would meet up, like around, I think it was like once a month at the beginning. At the beginning it was a lot more, and then just over time, like, we kind of got things happening. It became every few months I would be like, hey, when do you want to jam? He had some things, like, he would be out of town week, I mean, we tried to make it work with our schedules. And so it started off like every month, and then it kind of became every couple of months, and then it kind of became just whenever we could. Like, towards the end, I think the last time we jammed was in May of 2019, and we had talked about jamming, like, later on that year, like, more than once, about meeting up, but then it was just sort of, I mean, something would come up we forgot about, or going out of town. I mean, it was something. But yeah, the last time was in May. After all the serious stuff is when we started doing all of the comedy stuff. And like I said, I've mentioned this before, I'm going to release the comedy stuff. I'm going to give you a little sneak peek of one of our early comedy songs. And here it is. I smell shit. I was lying about taking a piss. He was taking a shit, I knew it. I was taking a piss through my butthole. It is called diarrhea. It flows like the river Jordan, yeah. Out my butthole, out his butt. So, as far as the comedy went, there was a certain point where we talked about performing these live. We just weren't sure where. And one of the reasons why, because we had some really funny songs, but every once in a while, like, we would maybe say something that, like, crossed the line where we thought, and so we were just, like, very hesitant to release it. So we didn't play anything live with the comedy, but we talked about it. And even at the beginning of this year, I was messaging Kerry saying, like, hey, like, I want to do some stuff. Like, what do you think about trying to, and he was like, I'm very interested to hear what you have to say. And I was just like, well, I don't really know what it is. I was like, but I want to work on them. Like, I want to keep, like, maybe take some of our songs and, like, redefine them, or, like, hone in on them a little bit, and, like, maybe write them a little bit or something. And so, but we never did. But a lot of them are really good as they are, so I'm gonna, like, release those. With that being said, we will end this video. I hope that you guys learned something about me, about Kerry, about the things that we went through. And yeah, I hope that if you made it this far, have a good day, a good night, and thank you for watching.